It's time for the chip race.
For strategy this week, we are going to take a look at the most talked about hand from this season of high stakes poker. It is that hand played out between three of the game's most famous players, Patrik Antonius, Daniel Negreanu, and Phil Ivey. To help us analyse it, we welcome back a former guest of the show who we think can provide some interesting insight into what went down. He is Finnish poker legend and First Land of Poker founder, Patrik Antonius. Patrik, welcome back.
Thanks, guys.
It's great to have you back, Patrik. To this hand, it's seven-handed with the blinds, 500, 1,000 with a 1,000 big blind ante. You are playing 186k, 186 big blinds, and you open to 2.5k from the hijack with the 5 of spades, 5 of diamonds. Playing 194k, 194 big blinds, amateur player Jonathan Gibbs flicks in fairly loose call from the cutoff with the 6-4 diamonds. Playing 225k, Daniel calls from the button with the 9 of spades, 9 of hearts. Playing 245k, Phil Ivey calls from the big blind with the king of clubs, 10 of diamonds. This is all fairly standard stuff here from the three pros. Obviously, Gibbs' call is a bit spewy. Daniel probably mixes calls and raises, which is fine. But Ivey's flat is actually just on the wrong side of break even. And I wanted to give maybe, Dara, you the opportunity to talk about these sort of calls in multi-way spots. I know it's a spot you've been studying.
Yeah, it's one of these spots where if one person raises and you're just in the big blind, you're defending, it's a pretty automatic defend, especially for tournament players with the big blind ante. But the more players that are involved in the pot, the worse it becomes, because it becomes much more likely you're dominated. You're going to need a much stronger hand to win multi-way. So you look at a lot of spots where, depending on stack depth and the opening position, but let's say king 6 off is the bottom of the calling range. But if you keep everything the same about the hand, but the only thing that changes is you put, say, a button caller in there. A lot of players make the mistake of thinking, well, now I'm getting much better odds, so I should call wider. But actually, when you look at GTO solutions, you'll see that the range becomes a lot tighter. You know, it might go from king 6 all the way up to king 10 or king jack. And with 4 players in the pot, once you call, king 10 off really shrivels up in value. It's just not going to make a super strong hand often enough at the time. And you're not going to feel great about it when you hit top pair.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, let's get to the flop where I want to bring you in, Patrik. It's 4 ways. The pot is 11,500 and it comes 10 of hearts, 9 of diamonds, 5 of clubs. Ivey checks. Patrik, with bottom set, you see bet 5k, 43% of pot. Gibbs folds. Daniel calls with middle set and Ivey calls with top pair and a backdoor. Patrik, this doesn't feel like a board where your range likes to bet all the time, maybe actually not too frequently at all, but obviously your specific hand loves to get more money in the pot. How do you balance up those two factors, and how significant is the presence of amateur player Gibbs when considering an exploitative line?
Well, I don't know regarding balancing. I actually, when you flop a bottom set, I would recommend to bet bigger, larger sizes because people don't fold top pairs. And there's a lot of straight draws also. But I mix it up. I like to think of poker that there's no really big mistakes regarding betting sizes and so on. Like, of course, like according to GTO, everything should be balanced and there is always a balanced range, but it's very difficult for players to really be balanced. You don't even get history so much with players. You get to play with some players once a year, a couple of times a year. So you should really capitalize on when you have a chance to make the money in the pot.
That's certainly an interesting counterpoint. Dara, I really like Daniel's decision to just call actually here. There are some draws, but not as many as there would be on a board with 2 of 1 suit. So it would feel like a raise here would be sort of springing the trap a bit too soon. Ivey is clearly in a murky place, out of position to both players with a top pair hand. Can you talk about Daniel's call and maybe how Ivey's loose pre-flop call is now being compounded by another error here?
Yeah, when you think about it, there's not a lot of reasons to raise, really. There's not too much to protect against, and you have a lot of weaker hands that want to just call as well. So I think Daniel's call is pretty much spot on and standard. Ivey has definitely made this bet, and now he's struggling around in it. He has a marginal top pair on a board where 2 people have shown interest. I think he should probably just give up at this point, and the solver agrees with that. The solver actually thinks the call is losing fairly substantially. It's not just a matter of whether we have the best hand right now. It's going to be very hard to get more money in good going down the streets.
Yeah, I also like Daniel's call. There's no flush draw and he has a position, I would still not fold on the flop. if I were Phil, because the betting size were so small. He's investing very small to see quite a large size of a pot, but it is difficult to play after the flop. And the king might not be a good card. If there's queen jack, you might just lose a lot in this case.
Yeah, so to the turn, the pot is 26,500 and it comes to 10 of clubs. So the board now reads 10 of hearts, 9 of diamonds, 5 of clubs, 10 of clubs. This makes top trips for Ivey and full houses for Patrik and Daniel. Again, Ivey checks. Patrik, you decide to check and Daniel bets 26k, almost pot. Ivey calls and Patrik, you also call. Patrik, talk us through your thought process. Why did you decide to put on the brakes here and not continue with another bet?
You know, it's very difficult sometimes for me to tell why, because I don't think so analytically in the hand, especially on the present moment when I'm playing. I play a lot with feel, but it's obviously my feel is based on like having played, millions of hands and being in these situations. And I would say most of the time I'm betting the turn, but I felt that there was something in Daniel that he was interested in the hand. I decided to check and let him bet in this case. If he has a draw, he can be spewing and try to buy it. If he has a 10, he's betting it.
Well, turning to you, Dara, Daniel decides on a polarizing sizing here, one that perhaps allows him to have hands like King, Queen, King, Jack, and Queen, Jack of clubs. In solver land, one important concept is protection, in the sense that when our range contains a lot of weak hands, as it would in this instance, and those hands need to check, we protect them by also checking our very strong hands. In game, we're obviously not in solver land though, and it seems like Daniel decided to bet to target 10x for value, I guess. How would you break down each player's action on this street?
When I looked at the solver output for this street, this was the one where I was really scratching my head, because the solver just goes check, check, check. All three players check. And it actually considers Daniel's bet to be a fairly significant mistake. 11 big blinds worse than a check. So I have to admit, I was completely confused about this. So I asked some cash players that I know to try and break it down for me. And one of them said, and this is a direct quote, "We use 9-9 to protect turn check back range because it unblocks hands they will bet on the river, which we can raise versus. And we also want to have some strong hands in our check back range, obviously. And this is not a vulnerable hand." So that's the theoretical explanation for why we check back here. We have lots of other hands that just really don't like this turn, and we don't want to get to the river without any strong hands in our range. So because we're very much unbalanced towards weaker hands, now in this specific instance we happen to have a very, very strong hand, but most of the time we don't have this, so we end up having to protect our check back range on the turn.
That's really interesting. Well, to the river, still three ways. The pot is now a rather bloated 104,500, and it comes the Queen of Diamonds. So the final board reads 10 of hearts, 9 of diamonds, 5 of clubs, 10 of clubs, Queen of Diamonds. Ivey again checks. Patrik, you check, and Daniel bets 54k. That's 52% of pot. Ivey takes quite a long time before folding, and then Patrik, you shove for 153k total. Daniel has to call 99k to win a pot of 410,500. So he needs to be good 24% of the time here. He talks through the possible hands that you could have. He gets rather fixated on you having quads for a little while. He gets annoyed at himself for not checking back the river before then folding what turns out to be the best hand. Patrik, I believe you shoved for value here with bottom boat. In retrospect, do you think it was a bit too thin?
Yes, of course I shoved for value here. I'm not trying to make someone lay down a better hand in this situation for this small of a bet. I have to say it would be pretty extreme for Daniel to check back the river if that was something that he was really thinking of. Yeah, so when Daniel bets, and Phil took a long time, and I was pretty sure that he had a 10. It was quite obvious that he had a 10. I was aware, obviously, that I can be beat. But yeah, to me, there was a lot of hands that Daniel can value bet. He can value bet ace 10. He can value bet a straight if he had a jack 8 or king jack, if he was firing with those hands. And Daniel is thinking that I have no bluffs there. Of course, I have sometimes bluffs. If you are a complete poker player, you will have bluffs in any spot. So if I have there 10-8, 10-7, I can be raising with these hands suited from this early position and be in this position. And if I'm thinking there that Daniel has a straight or he has an ace 10 and he's value betting this, I'm bluffing there with 10-7 or 10-8 if I just come with this conclusion. So I do have bluffs, But yeah, I would say that when we analyze this hand more deeply, my race is not great, obviously. I don't think it's a good race, but this is poker and it's a beauty of the game that sometimes plays that you make minor mistakes, they can work out amazingly. Daniel's fold, he was right on his read that I'm not bluffing, if that's something like credit to him. But on the other hand, there's only two hands that can beat him. If I have 10-9 or Queen 10, and he's holding two nines in his hand. I mean, I'm just putting that Ivy had that 10 that I can have 4 10s because he was thinking so deeply on calling the river, and he's not calling ever with a straight draw on the turn with Daniel's large size of a bet. He cannot have a straight 8-jack or king-jack, impossible. So he had a 10, I would put close to 100% there. So there's only these two hands and Daniel is blocking these 2 9s. So it's considering to the pot odds and stuff, like it's a wild fold. It could have looked amazing if I had that Queen 10 or 10-9 and I had his beat. It's a sick fold, but hey, it's nice we managed to play a hand like this. If you put our hands pre-flop that, hey, this is what you guys gonna have and this is how the board is gonna run, I think it's probably close to like 100,000 to 1 that I'm gonna win this hand. Could be even 1,000,000 to 1.
Well, Dara, I mentioned there that Daniel was frustrated with himself for not checking back the river. Obviously, Patrik has expressed a certain amount of incredulity that he would really consider that. But actually, the solver bears a decision of that nature out. As Patrik said, we're not in solver land and players are usually not capable of, absolutely nailing output in this way. But had Daniel not bet like he was thinking of not betting, or at least claiming he was thinking of not betting, that would have been by the book correct.
I mean, you are correct. I mean, in solver land, the solver mixes checks and bets on the river, but it checks more frequently than it bets, which is, interesting in itself that it would check a hand that strong. It's roughly 70-30 in terms of checking and betting. Both Daniel's decisions were actually interesting to me to look at what the solver thought. Once it mixes, that means that betting and checking are both fine. If you always bet in this spot, you would be betting too much. If you always checked, you wouldn't be betting enough. So you're supposed to mix from a purely GTO point of view. But the second decision is interesting because the solver actually approves of the fold. It thinks it's insanely close. In fact, this is a massive pot and it thinks calling with the nines would lose 1% of a big blind, which is literally as close as you can get. Now, that assumes that Patrik is bluffing at exactly the correct frequency. Daniel's comments after the hand suggested that he thought that Patrik was probably under bluffing. So that would make it a slam dunk fold, actually. Any spot that's close, if you think the other person is under bluffing, it's not close anymore.
And to react to that then, Patrik, obviously you were saying that, no, you absolutely do find bluffs in the right places there. So interesting there that Daniel has essentially underestimated your ability to find bluffs.
I mean, of course, I will sometimes find bluffs in that spot, but I don't know what is the frequency that I'll be bluffing, like when I'm going to have that 10-7 or 10-8. It's a really complex hand. Just when you look at everything, I'm even thinking it's more than 1,000,000 to 1 because all the betting sizes had to be also smaller in this case. All the actions just had to go perfectly like that. Feel had to be in the hand. It's just incredible that I can take this hand.
It feels like you're just trying to rub it in and needle him now. Anyway, but I'm going to move on to
1,000,000 to 1 shot, maybe a 10 to 1 shot.
I would really like to know if there's a AI to calculate based on things like how is it possible that I win this hand?
I'm really enjoying your post-mortem game here, Patrik. Dara, I want to do one quick sidebar with you. I mentioned there that the solver was disapproving of Ivy on pretty much every street. It would have folded every street. So I'm guessing it doesn't change its mind now. Expressed in big blinds, how bad would a call from Ivy have been here on the river?
Yeah, the solver thinks that if Ivy called, it's losing 42 big blinds. So, it's not even remotely close. The pot's been kind of escalating for him ever since pre-flop. Pre-flop was a very minor mistake at worst, 5% of a big blind. The solver thinks the flop mistake is just over a big blind. The turn mistake is just over 5, but this would be humongous, over 40 big blinds.
I would say something that regarding this solver, like once we play these kind of high stakes poker cash games, I would say that players tend to play much more on the loose side on the ranges. Mm-hmm. So everything gets a bit twisted in this way. Like I just see that people are more looking to play hands that are very marginal, that wouldn't normally play. Like for example, this Phil's King 10. Like he might just fold this 90% of the time in a normal cash game, but he just felt like playing it. So in this way, if you know what I mean, the solver goes pretty much wrong because of the pre-flop ranges can be much more wider what players play. This is something that needs consideration.
Sure.
That is a fair counterpoint. Patrik, I want to give you the final word. Daniel made a comment when he did his own breakdown piece on this hand where you said that you were used to playing bad players. I was interested because I was interpreting that phrase in a lot of different ways. First of all, is it true that you said that? And if so, what did you mean by that in the context of this hand?
This comment I cannot, first of all, remember. My whole life, I played against the best players in the world and the highest cash games that there's been online and live. And that's where I've been shining and having my best results. Like, for example, these online games, when Guy Lalibert was playing, I rarely profited any, if I even end up losing on these games. And I just end up winning on the games when it was all just best pros playing.
So very little dead money coming your way, no super soft private games.
Yeah, I played some private games lately in the South France with some bad players. Just occasionally, I would say, I don't know, once in a month a game or something like that because of the pandemic stuff. But yeah, I'm used to playing against the top of the top. So I don't even remember this conversation or anything with Daniel.
So to interpret it one other possible way, could you have been meaning I'm used to playing bad players like you?
I mean, I don't. Yeah, well. I mean, listen, I'm not gonna rub it in more with Daniel. He's
million to one.
It was 1,000,000 to 1, and I'll take it. I'll take that one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to play some more cash with him on the next season. Or Bellagio, welcome Daniel to play these high stakes cash games.
Fantastic stuff. Well, look, a great breakdown of a hand that really captured the poker world's attention. We wish you all the best with all the side games out there in Vegas, with Flop, of course, and the PAPC. Patrik Antonius, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Patrik.